Good morning, and welcome to our first weekly live stream in the last 2 months or so. It's been a little over 6 weeks. Connor can't do math. It's still early in the morning, so thank you for joining us over here. Good morning, James. How you doing?
Good morning, Connor. I'm doing terrific. Thank you for always having me a part of this wonderful show, and always good to see your glowing face early in the morning.
There's nothing you want to see more than on a Friday at 8 a.m. Connor staring at you with his deep blue eyes. Well, guys, thanks for tuning in. As you know, the whole purpose of the Comms Defense Show is that we want to make sure that you as security and technology leaders have insights and the best tools and techniques and strategies available so we can collectively win as an industry. We can collectively win as security leaders. So with that, we've got a pretty good show lined up today. We are going to talk about some big picture stuff, some small picture stuff. James's blog over at Better AppSec has kind of resurfaced up some gems we're going to walk through as well. And then at the end, we're going to talk about our favorite Confluence servers that are getting exploited like crazy across the wild and what you can do to fix that. So with that, let's get started. Pioneering solutions, transformational technology, and inspirational leaders. I'm your host, Connor Sherman, and this is the Confident Defense Podcast. Perfect. There we go. Now we can get started. We've done our intro. Let's rock and roll. So first thing I wanted to share out today is I want to talk about this really good conversation that happened on LinkedIn yesterday. So Joseph Cooper, and I'm going to share on my screen in a moment so you can all take a look at it, and I will put a link to that conversation in the notes here. Start this really simple question. Should CISOs be technical? And James, I had my opinion on this. I wanted to get your opinion on this, but the framing of this was, should a CISO be technical, or is it just executive managerial skills that they need? Is it just communication, understanding strategy, or is there more to it? And then, of course, how do you define technical? That was something that came up in the comments a lot. So, James, what's your thought on that? Where should the technical? Obviously, I've given away my perspective on this little poll. Well, yeah, what do you think? Should the CISO be technical?
I think there's a little bit of subjectivity to this, right? Like, what I mean by that is it depends on the business a bit, right? If you are a CISO of a law firm, like, how technical do you really need to be? Like, I feel like that's where like strong business acumen, management, and board tenure, so to speak, is really important around like protecting the law firm, the information that it has, and not necessarily. It might be like simple systems, right? Like file servers, etc. Email might be important, right? And then like endpoint. You don't necessarily have a large cloud infrastructure that you're talking about, or a big data center. It really is focused on, in that type of instance, right? Like maybe like third-party risk management, vendor management. You're not worried about hardware exploitation, as much. So I think that it really depends on the context of the business in which a CISO needs to operate. And I think that some people will be better suited for that than others. So I don't think there's a perfect answer here. I think that if you happen to be in a cloud native environment where your business runs on a cloud infrastructure, and you have a really complex tech stack. It doesn't even really need to be complex. It could be complex to the layman, but like, you do need to understand like how software is deployed and architected inside of cloud infrastructure, and then cloud infrastructure itself, right? In the shared responsibility model with some of these providers out there. That's important. That requires some technical acumen that you're not necessarily going to focus on if you're focused on the other stuff in a law firm. So I really think that it depends. So if you move aside like non I guess product digital, more kind of like practices, and protecting documents, like
Yeah.
that's one area. And then the other area is like I run a business that like we're vending software, we're vending services in a cloud environment, or maybe you have a data center. You're worried about like your data center sprawl and your cloud infrastructure and DDoS attacks and anomalous activity at the edge. And do I have my WAF? Is that protecting me? Like what's behind it? Like how do I do micro segmentation? How to do the macro segmentation? What am I doing about database security? Right? All of those different layers. Yeah, you're going to need to be a little bit technical, right? And I think that you need to have come up through a technical background, or if you didn't, you really should go read about it. Like that would
Yeah,
be my,
minimum.
yeah, like that would be my, my kind of like take on it. I don't have a strong opinion per se, but that's just
Mm.
my initial impression.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about that, right? I think there's a lot of organizations who, by the way their business is organized, they don't have to ship code. They don't have to manage they don't have to manage a cloud environment. What they can do is they can run their entire business off of SaaS applications. And really, at that point, you've really just say you're focusing on the data and the identity and the legal language in your agreements, right? Do you have the ability to go after your SaaS vendors if they drop the ball and there's a data breach which impacts you and your clients? So when I think about that profile of company, and I think it's a really good call out that they're the gradient of technicalness necessary to be an effective CISO depends on the technical reliance that the company has on its own homegrown technologies. So if you're someone who's like, you're not shipping your own technology, you're using SaaS services, then effectively your CISO could actually be a CIO. They could show up with, can they understand the technology and how the technology is going to empower the business, and then wrap in good security fundamentals in that, and then they would be highly effective, right? They could be highly effective. But that same person in an environment where you're trying to ship custom code and the thing that you put on the internet is how you make your revenue won't succeed as well because you won't get down into the weeds enough to understand dependency libraries and the supply chain attack issues that you have there. You maybe only be at a high level of like, oh, we have vulnerability management. So I think there is that sense of the more technical, the more the company relies on its own technology, the more technical the CISO should follow through. That was my take on it. But I really like that idea of a gradient that you introduced there.
Yeah, and I think there's multiple, I guess, offshoots here around like, are we talking about how large is the organization, right? Like, are
Mm.
we talking about a 100,000 employee organization, right? Where the security team itself is like, a couple hundred people.
Right.
Yeah, there's going to probably be a lot more focus on managerial and senior leadership, executive leadership type of stuff, like painting the vision of where you need to go. But I do think that, sure, like let that be the focus. You still need to understand some of these core concepts on the technical side. So I think that like there is a bar, right? No matter how high you've elevated yourself, you're global CISO of the biggest organization in the world, you still need some technical chops. So
Mm-hmm.
keep reading those Medium posts at betterappsec.com and
Gorgeous
stay
segue.
relevant.
Gorgeous segue. So let's talk about this new one. So you've just resurfaced this really good, an oldie and a goodie, because it
Yeah.
still is applicable today as it ever has been. These 4 steps to scaling application security successfully. Now you've got other things in the works that you're coming out with, but for those who are looking for the TLDR of the TLDR of the TLDR, what's going on with this post? Kind of why resurface this one?
Yeah, so like this one in particular, I think comes up the most, right? People are always kind of like in different points in their journey of building and scaling an application or product security team. But I think this one strikes the right balance between like whether you're starting or you're fully shifted left and you're so far left you don't even there's nowhere else for you to go, right? Like this really like I think hits the sweet spot, right? It's the Goldilocks of okay, well, yes, I understand that like
Mm-hmm.
there's certain things I need to do from a basic processy perspective to document risks, but like I'm a little past that, and I really actually need some tooling to help me, and I need to put some education out there, and I need to make sure that like there's secure libraries that get evangelized and adopted. That's where this really comes into play, right? Creating the mechanism for a security team to say, hey, I have the bare minimum, the guardrails, so to speak, in place around making sure that things don't get open broadly, whether it's internally or to the internet or whatever it might be. The access is like there's a lower threshold that you can reasonably set with inside the organization, and then check for that with automation. And that's all I'm really like trying to get across here. And I think like what hit the nail on the head here, based on feedback from people, was if you scroll down in this article, there's like step 4, which is measuring the value, right?
Yes.
And there's like 2 KPIs that I talk about. The leading KPI, which is like how much work am I saving like developers, and that's exasperated by the lagging KPI, which is like, well, how hard is it for an attacker to successfully exploit me, right?
Mhm.
And you can cross correlate those with logs, right? So for for what did I use an example here? I don't know. Let's say cross-site scripting. You have a Node.js application. You're using Helmet. It has the anti-cross-site scripting function that you're leveraging on your inputs. You can look for that with linting, right, and say yes, it's in place. That person didn't need to implement that themselves, right? All they needed to do was decorate their function or whatever with it, and they get it, right, or use it in line.
Sure.
So let's say that saves that developer 2 hours per function call, and then you have on the other side, attacks that happen regularly. You quantify those attacks. We're looking for like cross-site scripting like attacks. Through the logs, right? You could see like script tags or whatever it might be. Your WAF might categorize them, and then you can really kind of say like, okay, I'm saving people time, and it's preventing like real attacks from happening. There's other angles there, right? Like how long does it take for somebody to be successful at one of these
Sure,
things?
yeah.
Or did I successfully deter them? And are they doing now that we've implemented this, do we see an increase somewhere else? SQL injection, right? Like, okay, I said that one. So, do we see now an increase in SQL injections? Like, how are you changing the landscape, right, based on these kind of secure defaults that you're putting in place with the libraries and the checking, and giving developers the tools essentially to protect the business that they're developing at, right? And it's at that sense of empowerment that becomes heightened when you have real world data to support like, oh yeah, this is meaningful, right?
Yeah.
And that's what this really kind of drives home, and why I really wanted to surface it again.
And I love the KPIs on this. I thought that was really powerful. I think every company's going to have this is where the CISO gets to step in and say like, here's one of your greatest jobs is to figure out how do you communicate effectively with data. And these are just some categories of KPIs to help with that leading or lagging in this particular space. I think there's a lot of people who talk about driving with KPIs and driving with metrics, but it is also a difficult challenge, right? And so often it gets missed, and the power of that gets lost. And so if you're thinking about as a security leader, how do I increase adoption, bring transparency to the process, and put in the right metrics, make sure you're measuring it properly, or at least in a way that's consistent, right? It is a difficult thing to measure security well. So just doing the best you can to surface up the key items will help teams understand what they're being measured again and how to adopt the tools and frameworks you want them to. So,
No doubt.
Big fan of that. So speaking of frameworks, I want to segue over into our next thought here. Actually, before we leave Better AppSec, if you're listening to this, click that follow button, give them a clap. Do that. Definitely. It's worth getting this in front of more and more people. I think more and more security leaders should be following betterappsec.com. Anywho, moving on. Okay, so SANS back in May released the Center of Internet Security, the CIS, released the latest version of their controls, which is from version 7 to version 8. Now, SANS and the Center of Internet Security are joined pretty tightly at the hip there. So remember, it was the SANS top 20 controls a few years ago that stopped being the SANS and became the CIS top controls. And now, big shift, there's no longer 20, but there is 18 of these controls. And I really appreciated what CIS did with this. They made it more effective. They made it more, excuse me, not effective. They made it more applicable to modern cloud native companies. So a lot of companies have adopted an architecture they've been a big fan of for a long time, which is if you're going into an office, the office is like Starbucks. There's nothing important in the office. You're there, you have the coffee, you have the printer, you have the people, you connect to a VPN, and then you have access to what's sensitive. So when you look at CIS, things like wireless access controls just got nixed completely from the list because the value of that has moved on. We're no longer there. And so I looked at this, I was really excited about it. I thought it was a good move forward. If you are a security leader or technology leader and you're like starting out, right? You just need that grounding framework to make sure you've got your bases covered, you're not negligent, and you're investing your time and energy in the right way. This is an incredibly powerful framework to use. It's simple, it's prescriptive. It's not easy. I mean, moving the company is always hard, but like I like it a lot to go forward. So, and I was happy to see the version 7 to version 8 migration happen and it get more tailored to what we're actually dealing with.
Yeah. I like the simplification that they did and the consolidation on some of these. It's not I need to do less work now. It's okay. I've simplified the way to think about these controls. And I really do think that this is the right way to think about it now.
Yeah. And see, like they'll combine things like the control of admin privileges, this one, and the access access bell need to know just became access control management. And you're like, yeah, that's you. When you go to solve one, you solve both at the same time. It just made it far more easier to adopt for companies. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. So I just want to make sure you guys knew about this. I would definitely say if you have some cycles as we enter, we're not at the holiday period yet, but October, November, December is coming. Some people I'm told have extra cycles. So what I would suggest is just do a quick self audit against this and see where you measure up, maybe, and let that help shape up what 2022's security strategy is going to be if you're in that mindset already. Let's jump into this. So I want to talk about this thing I have on Jenkins. So I got some headlines here where Jenkins got a security breach. Now, it's not going to impact your Jenkins server if you're using that for your CI/CD builds. But what this kind of hit home was you had two big brands involved here, and one impacted the other. So I mean, for a wonderful news article. So first and foremost, Confluence servers have a remote code, have a vulnerability that allows an unauthenticated remote adversary to execute arbitrary code. The Confluence, they have a bug for it, as you might imagine, and they're going to patch it here. So this was, if you have been living under a rock, this is real. It's happening. If you have a Confluence server, make sure you patch it immediately. It has gotten as much traction, whereas the US Cybercom is telling people to do this. I've seen other people coming out of the CISA and other places where they're like, last week they said, don't go home over the weekend until you have patched your Confluence servers because they are aggressively and actively being exploited. It gives the adversary a foothold, and then they bounce from there. So again, this goes back to a similar style of breach that we saw with Kaseya. Piece of software, widely distributed, has a vulnerability. The adversary gets a foothold into all of those environments. One of them was Jenkins. Brings us back here. So Jenkins got breached. It was a ancillary server that they weren't using anymore, but they definitely had a security. They had a breach, and there was real impact to the company where the adversary used it to deploy some crypto miners. So you as a customer should not be affected by this, but
it was through their bug bounty program that they the researcher found it. There's a really good write up by them. Who was it? HTTP Void has the write up. Well, let's link it in the show notes. Beautiful write up. Beautiful. I would say top 10 write up on this. Yeah. Was it OGNL injection? So that's something to do with Java. Not going into the nuts and bolts here, but like that's how the Apache struts vulnerability was exploited through a similar type of Java object that they were able to take advantage of. But take a look at the write-up. I would definitely recommend reading through, even if you don't fully understand some of what's going on here, which I admit I don't know. I don't fully understand what's going on in here, but it is definitely worth a peek at. Very interesting. And this was another interesting note here. I know we got to wrap up here. This was easily like the exploit itself was you could bypass WAFs essentially, right? That was like a key piece of this in getting the payload over. So as critical, right, as WAFs are, which they are, I'm not trying to like downplay them. They're always bypassable, whether it's base 64 encoding, like your payloads or.
No, tell me it's not so. What?
Yeah.
You can bypass it by just putting a base 64 encoding? No. We've never seen that before.
Yeah, I think they used. I think they use Unicode. I think it is. If you look at the payloads, you could take a look at what they did here. Really cool. Go patch your stuff, please. So this one's a whopper.
I think the big lesson here is you don't need to understand how the exploit works to understand how to install the patch. So we'll do that. Cool. So with that, we will leave you with that. And the last thing I want to give you guys is a bit of eye candy that James surfaced up for me today. This is coming from our friend over. So Wasim did this. He came on the TLDR Sec newsletter. If you don't subscribe to that, I recommend it. I subscribe to it. I love it. I think it's really cool. James, what's going on in this wonderful piece of art?
So I think we were talking about this before the show. Like this is just completely ex-nayed a like top interview question. Like everybody now can visualize what happens when you put a domain name into a web browser, or URL into a web browser. Everybody should get 100 points on this question. I think the visualization here is fantastic. This was well done. I definitely think I agree. Go subscribe to Clint's newsletter. Definitely top number one in the newsletters I subscribe to. Always has great content. Big fan. So yeah, this was a masterpiece though. I'm gonna print it out. I'm gonna frame it and then sell it on eBay or something. No, I'm just kidding. I definitely like. I'm a visual person, and this to me was really great to see done to the extent that it was done to.
Yeah, maybe that'll be some new art at the new studio over here. So We'll see. Well, so with that, folks, I hope you all have a great Friday morning. I mean, here we are. We're in the beginning of September, really. We've gone past all the American holidays, and now it's this kind of last sprint to the end of the year, if you're in that mindset. So we are going to be starting these up every Friday, getting a good rhythm down, and again, focusing on these 20-minute conversations where we're going to talk about some headlines throughout the week. Everything's going to be actionable so that you, as security and technology leaders, have the greatest chance possible of winning this infinite game of cybersecurity. So with that, thank you so much, James.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure, guys. I will see you all next week.